So on today's edition, I'm talking to a man who is clearly ageless or a wizard. It's C.W. Anderson. How are you doing today?
Man, I'm so good, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, man. And also, listen, maybe off camera you can tell me, the Fountain of Youth, where is it? Because, again, if you look at a picture of you from ECW and now, I'd be confused on what year they're from.
Yeah, I know it's crazy. A little bit more gray. And of course, I didn't get gray until like I was 35 and I had liver failure, and I immediately got gray like right through here. But it's starting to come through a little bit more. But a good woman really helps.
Also, possibly some hair dye. Not that I've ever dyed my beard, folks. Not that I've ever dyed my beard.
I usually do it right before I wrestle. They got the just for men's thing that I kind of touch up a little bit.
Oh, yeah?
I don't probably look so old now. I mean, I just turned 53 Sunday, so I got to do everything I can to keep up with the young guys.
Well, you look great, and I also consider you an uncrowned ECW world champion. But before we get to that, I want to ask you, where is the strangest place you've ever wrestled?
Wow, that's a good question. Not too long ago, in front of a Piggly Wiggly in West Virginia.
Wow.
Yeah, it was actually in the parking lot of the Piggly Wiggly. I wrestled Bobby Fulton, and we dressed on the side of the Piggly Wiggly and walked through the wrestling ring truck trailer as our gorilla position. Like myself, Lodi, I think Chase Stevens was on it as well. Maybe Mr. Hughes. And again, I wrestled Bobby Fulton, and it was guys like that. So I think that's one of the strangest places.
Yeah, I think the Piggly Wiggly has now become more famous thanks to you and the other wrestlers putting on a show for the fans. Man, the Piggly Wiggly got a good show that day. I wish I was there for that one. But there's been so much in your wrestling career I want to discuss today, and one of them really hit me. I was like, wait a minute. C.W. Anderson was in the power plant in WCW in 1998. Tell me how you even get involved with this, because this is before we had NXT and the WWE and the Performance Center. This was the power plant where people like Goldberg and other talented wrestlers came and trained, then went on to Nitro and Thunder. How'd you get involved, and who was in your class?
I trained two guys. Well, I was a trainer before I went to the power plant, and two of the guys I ended up training, one of them was a little bit lesser known. His wrestling name, or his name's Curtis White. He wrestled as Toad, but he also did like the last stint of WCW. He tagged with PG-13 as Frog. But one of my famous students turned out to be Lodi he was Raven's sign guy. And they went to the power plant because Pez Whatley got them down there. They went to the tryout, and one day they told me, and this is Lodi had just became Lodi, and they're like, CW, you doing nothing but spinning your wheels here in North Carolina. Why don't you just get ready and come down to the power plant? So for like 3 months, I trained because Lodi told me, he said, there's a lot of squats involved. You're going to squat a lot. They failed to tell me about the push-ups that was going to be involved. So all I did was squat all day long, the free Hindu squats, and went up there and was, on Wednesday, it was 98, February of 98. And I don't think anybody in my class made it as far as making it, but possibly Elix Skipper. I can't remember if Elix was in my class or not, but I know he was around that time. There was 30-something guys that started on a Wednesday. By the end of the day, there was 6. 2 more dropped on that Thursday, and then we finished with 4 on Friday because of the regiment. You start at 9 o'clock in the morning, and Sarge comes in, he throws his bag, and he's cussing and screaming. Anybody that's seen, I mean, you can go on YouTube and look at the power plant tryouts. They were brutal. I always tell people, I joke, if you told me I had to do those 3 days again, and we'll give you $1 million+ I'm like, nah, that's okay. I'll go work at McDonald's. I don't want to go through that torture again. But, the whole day you're from like 9 to 3:30 in the afternoon, and it's a 30-minute break just for lunch, but you're squatting in a circle, and you have a bucket, a 5-gallon bucket. That's your bucket that you turn upside down, and your ass has to hit that bucket each time you squat. And there's power plant students that were there around you that are watching you. And if you don't hit that bucket, you start all over again, and you do sets of 50, 75, 100. And after those 50, 75, or 100, you drop down and you do 25, 30 push-ups, and then you're doing neck bridges front and back, and it's a repetitive process. I think the first day I was there, Goldberg came in and did some training, and he run us all out because I was the only one that was a quote-unquote wrestler. Everybody else was marks trying out. So he put us outside for an hour, and we run wind sprints for a solid hour. And you paired up in groups of 5 or 6, and you ran forward, backwards, the little karaoke crisscross, they call it. And if you were the last person in that group, you had to knock out 50 squats and be ready by the time it was your group again. And it was nonstop. After lunch, you got back and it was the same thing again, but then he got you in the ring. But you getting in the ring was standing in a straight line, jogging in place. One person get up, hit the ropes. By the time they hit them coming back, you do a front flip, and there was 3 rings. You had to jump out, run to the other ring, and it was a repetitive process. Well, again, I was the only one who knew how to run the ropes. So those guys were getting their ass handed to them trying to run the ropes because Sarge is screaming at you. Hit it harder, hit it harder, hit it harder. And then at the end of the day, you turn around and come back the next day. And there was a few times I was going to quit. Luckily, Toad grabbed me and pushed me and, kept motivating me to stay. And I'm glad I did. I remember coming home, Lodi had to drive me home because I couldn't drive. And he tells a story to where I had to throw up one time because your body goes past the point of exhaustion. I had to throw up one time. So we're on the side of 85 coming back from Atlanta, going back to North Carolina. And he says, I'm sitting in the driver's seat and I look over and I see CW walk down the hill. I look back again and CW is gone. Like I not passed out, but slipped, and because my legs were so tired and give out, I fell down and rolled down the interstate ditch and was laying in the bottom. So it was 3 days. It was 3 days like that. It was just something, and you paid a $250 deposit that you didn't get back. And if you made it through and they told you could come back, you had to pay $3,000 for them to train you. You paid $1,000 just to get in the door, and then you finished your payments out. I paid the $1,000 when I came back, but I never finished paying the rest of it.
Wow. So that's, it's funny you give the numbers out because I don't think anyone actually knows the exact amount and numbers of the power plant because it seems like you come in and WCW in 1998 will pick you up because, again, the NWO was in 96 and still rolling around. You have Goldberg, Sting, so many talented wrestlers are so hoping that you'll be there. But obviously they're also hoping you'll pay and right. Give the money to them because they realize, oh, this is an easy way to make a buck. We'll just get these guys. Hey, you've seen Sting, right? And then you come in. But okay, so you go 3 days, you come back, you give the $1,000, you don't pay the rest. Is there ever a point where you're offered a contract in WCW and you said, like, I'm okay. I'm
No, that was I was never offered one. Even though Joey Styles said it when I got the ECW that I was offered a 6-figure contract, it was just a working thing. But I was never offered one. Even though when it was Sarge, Mike Winter, and Pez Whatley were the 3 trainers there, and they took a raw C.W. Anderson. Because I was never formally trained. I just kind of learned as I went. I started in December 4th of 1993 was my debut. And they took it and kind of turned it in and honed it to what got my job at ECW. That it got to a point where, like, the class I was in, the ones previous and then the ones that came after, was the Natural Born Thrillers, Lash LaRue, Mike Sanders, Chuck Palumbo, Mark Jindrak, guys like that. And it got to a point where Sarge had me training those guys at some point, showing them things in the ring.
For free, though? Are you working for free?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, I was there training, but when because you had the 3 rings, and on Monday they were painting the Thunder ring, the Thunder canvas there, or they'd paint the next Nitro canvas and run ring. Sarge was usually working out in another ring with somebody. So you only basically had 1 ring to work out in if you weren't working out with Sarge. A lot of guys came in. I remember meeting Johnny Swinger there. he came in, they would sit and watch videos and tapes and stuff like that. And at the time, I didn't really like Swinger because Swinger is a very quiet person if you don't know him. He's to himself. I took it as him being stuck up. That's just Swinger's personality. He's just quiet to himself. But once you get to know him, like I did at ECW, fell in love with the guy. Because, he was part of me and Simon, or I was, with him and Simon's Swinger. So
the rumor of the WCW contract, that is not true. You were never offered. It's more of a Joey Styles. Let's kind of lift you up more and say he was offered a contract, but he didn't want to go there. He wanted to be here.
Yes. Yeah. I had actually gotten frustrated with the place because they had so much talent there. Guys making 75, 125 a year. We would go to the Thunder Tapers when they were in Atlanta, and what was it, Doug Dillinger, that asshole that was the security guy? He would never let the power plant guys backstage. He didn't give a damn when we were part of the power plant. He didn't care. He would kick us out. And one of the things that always stuck with me, and I told my buddy Steve Carito when I saw him this weekend in Orlando, because we went to Disney and hung out with him, was Norman Smiley teaches down at the Performance Center. That was one of the things. Norman Smiley went out back one day after we got thrown out, and there was like 4 of us. He stood back there 30, 45 minutes and just talked to us. He didn't know who we were. He just knew we were kids from the power plant. And that was the one thing with Norman that always stuck with me, is how nice and genuine he was. Didn't know who we were. And then got to know him a little better when we were at MLW. But that's the one thing I told Steve that story. I said, Norman Smiley will forever be over with me just for the 30 minutes he took with somebody like me who he didn't know from Adam's House Cat. So then it got to the point where one day J.J. Dillon and Paul Orndorff were 2 of the agents there, and they came to the power plant to see what kind of talent they had because they had no idea. So they paired us all up to wrestle in front of them. Well, I got paired with my buddy Kurt, the one I trained, and the one we were every weekend basically wrestling each other, and we were the last ones to go. Brad Armstrong was there. He was watching, and Kurt and I put on the match that was literally popping the boys. The boys were like fans. And we got done with our match, and Brad Armstrong came up to us and was like, man, that's some straight ECW shit right there. And he said, that was awesome. And Brad Armstrong putting me over and putting Kurt over. A couple minutes later, I was standing off by myself. J.J. Dillon and Paul Orndorff woke up to me, and they tell me, they kind of like my skills in the ring, but I didn't really have a look. They're more of a cosmetic company, and I really they didn't think I'd had what it takes to make it in WCW. Basically, thanks for nothing. Thanks for coming. So it was kind of a heartbreaking deal that my wrestling was okay, but they didn't think I had what it takes to make it WCW.
Interesting, because there was a lot of people at WCW who I was like, I don't think you belong on TV, but I also am not a wrestler. I didn't train, so I have nowhere. But like if I went to a restaurant and there was a bad steak, I can also realize this is a bad steak. And but with you, the talent obviously is there, and the Anderson last name really sticks out because hello, Arn Anderson is there. CW Anderson. Hello, this isn't easy. Horace Hogan. All right, I will crap on one person. Horace Hogan is there, and he clearly he's there. Why? Related to Hulk Hogan. I love and always will adore Lenny Poffo, but he was making $200,000 a year. He never wrestled once in WCW.
Yeah, during that time I hadn't met Arn before, so I was a little apprehensive about carrying that Anderson name, even though I got permission to use it. It was still, when you think of Anderson, you don't really think of Gene or Lars or Ole. It's Arn.
Yeah, 100%.
And I've always respected that since I've gotten the Anderson name. And so I didn't really get to meet him until the little bit I was at, WWE for the ECW stuff. And then recently I've gotten to know him quite well, working with his son Brock. And, of course, we'll talk about that coming up. But that was why I didn't want to do anything to piss Arn off. So that was kind of kept quiet.
So he didn't know that you were working using the Anderson last name. So let's start from the beginning, I guess. Where does that name come from? And you're saying he didn't even know about it until years later.
As far as I know, because I've never had an encounter with him. Once I got I'll tell you how I got it. When I got the ECW and I got the Enforcer moniker when I was doing the Dangerous Alliance, Paul told me, and again, this is Paul Heyman telling you a story, so
yeah,
take it for what it's worth. that he called Arn to get the enforcer, see if I could use the enforcer moniker. And his words from Arn was, Arn hopes I have better luck using it than he did. And again, that's what Paul told me. And this is way before, I was still early in the game. So Paul and his notorious lies were found out a lot later, that he was that type of person. Again, not shitting on Paul at all, because I owe that man my career, but it's, it's a fact. Everybody says it. In 1993, when I started, I didn't know who I was going to be. There was two guys running the Anderson thing, Pat and Rocky. Rocky was a little bit older. Pat was younger at the time. He was like in his early 30s. And Pat was looking for somebody to tag with because Rocky was retiring. And they got permission from Gene to use it before Gene passed away, and to use it as they saw fit. Well, when I come along, the night Pat was on the same show I was just working under a hood. And it's an emphasis rib. They called me El Chico, but that was when Razor Ramon was going on, and they wanted me to do that gimmick. And it was a mud show type feel with me marking somebody like that. But it was just to get my feet wet. Once Pat saw me wrestle and he saw my look, he wanted to know if I would. He set me down and said, "Would you be interested in becoming an Anderson?" And I'm looking for a tag partner. All we need is you to come up with a 3-letter name, because he was Pat, you had Ole, you had Arn. I said, man, I'd love to, because I didn't know who I was going to be. I was just simple Chris Wright. So for weeks, man, 2 weeks, I came up with Ike and Cal. That's the only two things I could come up with. And I'm sitting and I'm talking to a guy that's a manager on the indie shows, but he was also my former baseball coach. And I've known the man my entire life. His name's Randy Driver. And I said, Mr. Randy, I said, I can't come up with anything. I don't know what I'm going to call myself as this Anderson. He said, Chris, just use your initials. We'll call you CW. So it just kind of stuck.
Wow.
And I started running with Pat. And, years later, that's when I come up with the hook, the CW hook, because in the Northeast, there was a guy that was running around named Tom Casati. A lot of people, everybody knows, if you're that, knows who Tom Casati is. Well, when he came out, he was always doing this. He had it held high. Well, me being a big fan of hip hop and rap, I was a huge fan of Tupac, and one of Tupac's albums, he's doing this. So it just kind of hit me one day to have that hook, because everybody needs that hook.
Yeah, me and my friends still do the CW Anderson all the time. So you coming up with that, and thankfully for Tupac for allowing this to be made, and then you doing it. Wow, it's so crazy how that all comes together as CW Anderson. And then like my first big experience with you is in ECW of the Dangerous Alliance. You have, Paulie Dangerously, and then there's you. It's like a fun, weird, like, it's not a comedic group, but in a way there clearly is some, impersonations in this stable. But yet you have a tag team. You're with eventually Swinger and Simon Diamond. But when you start running on your own, and you have a rivalry with Tommy Dreamer, the heart and soul of ECW. What did that mean to you? Because ECW in 99 and 2000 was on the same exact level. I don't care what anyone says. If you're a wrestling fan, it was on the same exact level as the WWF and WCW. It was. I don't care. There's no third. There's no second. It all was running the same.
Right.
So what did you feel? Because suddenly the spotlight, when Paul Orndorff and J.J. Dillon are telling you, hey, you got great skills, kid, but we don't think you're marketable. Now here you are fighting the heart and soul of ECW. How's that feel?
Well, in the beginning, like my very first match, it wasn't on pay-per-view, but it was dark. It was, I think it was Anarchy Rules. There's a clip of me trying to make a save, and New Jack comes out and hits me with a football game. So that was the first pay-per-view. But I did dark match with Bill Wiles against Danny and Roadkill, because we were running a program with them. Well, basically, we wrestled Danny and Roadkill almost every night. When Bill and I got put together, it was like a last-ditch effort to throw a tag team out there, and Bill and I clicked. And then it got to the point where me and Bill loved tagging with each other because we had fantastic chemistry. So this is before the Dangerous Alliance. That night of the pay-per-view, Tommy and I were getting close, because my traveling clique was Jack Victory, Louis Dangerously, Sign Guy Dudley, Steve Carino, who's been my best friend for 30 years, and Tommy and Francine. So we all rode together. That night of the pay-per-view, filling up, went over a match, and I'm walking around, I'm all nervous, because I get nervous every time I wrestle. Like my I Quit match, I'm almost throwing up. But I walk by Tommy and he grabs me and he gets like this close to me. He said, I want you to go out there tonight. He said, I want you to have the match of the night. He said, I want you to steal the show. He said, and I want you to stick it up those people's ass at WCW for not giving you a chance. He said, I'm giving you this opportunity, not because you're my friend. And he said, because you effing deserve this. He said, go out there, steal this fucking show, and tell J.J. Dillon and Paul Orndorff they can kiss your ass because they made a mistake. They give me all the motivation in the world right there to do that. But later down the road, when Lance Storm got ready to leave, Paul told Tommy that they needed to make me. So that's when I kind of turned on the Dangerous Alliance and went on my own and started doing stuff as singles and started getting in there with Simon and Swinger, and then started the program with Tommy. I didn't look at it as that it's Tommy Dreamer. He's the icon, of ECW. He's the founding forefather, so to speak. Tommy was just a good friend. I did see a little bit of it. Hey, this is Tommy Dreamer. He's up here. But Tommy and I were so close that I was just wrestling with a good friend of mine. And that's the way I took it. And to me, that made it a lot easier. And our chemistry was so great together in the ring that it was, like a night off working with Tommy.
Man, yeah, there's a spine buster spot where you give a spine buster and a guardrail. And boy, that looked painful. But yet, you are also in ECW when one of the most notorious wrestling situations happens, where Mike Awesome is the ECW champion. He leaves with the championship to go to WCW. Taz, who is a WWF wrestler now, has to come defend ECW. So it's WCW contract wrestler, WWF contract wrestler, fight each other in the ECW situation for the championship. You are in ECW. What is that situation like? Because there are so many wrestling stories that are like top 10 worthy, as like Jacques Rougeau and the Dynamite Kid fighting backstage, Paul Orndorff versus Vader backstage. But this Taz and Mike Awesome situation, if it happened today, holy God, man.
Yeah,
the articles, the podcast, everything would have been on fire. What was that situation like?
I know Mike Awesome wasn't allowed in the locker room. He actually wasn't allowed in the building until match time. He stayed out in the car with with Doug Dillinger. And the only thing a lot of us had a problem with was that it took Dreamer and Taz to beat him. It took two guys to beat one guy. That was the one thing a lot of us were saying. I don't know the whole situation of why he left. I think he went about it the wrong way. And in my opinion, leaving with the belt, he should have done the right thing, because we all as wrestlers should do the right thing, drop it, move on with your life. But I just remember him not being allowed in the locker room, and it was years later before I ever saw him again. I never had a problem with Mike Awesome to an extent. I just know that when he was the champ and I wrestled him the first time, he couldn't remember shit. I had to call the entire match. Here I am 6 months into the business, and here I'm having to call the match for our ECW champ. And then it wasn't until years down the road when I was in Japan that I totally I ain't gonna say I hated him, but he rubbed me the wrong way over an issue because he didn't remember me somehow. And he totally had heat with me from there on out.
Interesting. That, obviously he went on to be the fat chick Thriller in WCW. Yeah. So, he's probably remembered for a few different things, but fat chick Thriller probably is the one.
He was, to me, he was stiff in the ring to an extent. His German suplexes always dumped me on my head. And of course I was 250, 260. So at that time, fat guys don't fold very well. So that hurt like hell. His clotheslines were always stiff, and then him forgetting everything in the match and me having to call it just one issue after another.
Yeah. I'm guessing his size is why Paul Heyman was so infatuated with him, because he could do a powerbomb off the top rope and carry someone to the top rope. Not you're up there and he kind of gingerly throws you. He would climb up holding you with one arm and then throw you off, which,
WWE and WCW, most of those guys are huge. They're Mike Awesome size anyway, but at ECW, we were all normal height. Most guys were my height or shorter. You had a few like Jack Victory, a few others that were a little bit taller, but everybody else was around the 6 foot range. So we weren't a very, big company. That's the one thing Paul was a genius at, was noticing guys' talent, not just their size. Because you've seen a lot of guys at WWF that were looked all the same. They were cookie cutter. You just changed their hair color. They all looked the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, though, after, Mike Awesome and the Ted situation happens, it's kind of unfortunate that ECW might have grown too quick because suddenly they're on TNN, huge moment. Really, it turns out that was just a testing ground for Monday Night Raw to be on TNN. And Monday Night Raw takes over. ECW loses the TV deal, goes bankrupt. It's closed. The WCW closes 2 months later. Right now, suddenly the business is flipped upside down, and the WWF owns everything. What was that situation like for you? Because I feel like I said it a little while ago, was you were an uncrowned ECW champion. Were there conversations? Because Rhino was running roughshod over a lot of people as ECW champion, but I have a feeling in my brain is he would lose to someone, then you're the next heel to take over that rank. It happened with a lot of people, with Steve Corino, Justin Credible, so many others before that. Was there a plan? Were there discussions to make you ECW champion at some point before it closed?
Yes. That was the thing was at Living Dangerously, I was fighting Notebook for the vacant television title, and I was winning that. And then, I don't know, when down the road, because Joey Styles had alluded to I had champion material written all over me that I would be the ECW champ. I was supposed to get my contract, because I wasn't under contract at ECW. So I was supposed to get my contract at Living Dangerously and the TV belt. And there was a rumor, there was a talk that there was a chance they were going to turn me babyface because I was getting so over with my matches. Because they even did a story on me in one of the magazines that said you can't spell ECW without CW. And the main thing was, every time you go to an ECW show, one thing you would never say is CW Anderson has a bad match. It's always a good match. He gives you his money worth. So after the I Quit match and I got a standing ovation, there was talks of me going babyface because I was getting so over. But yeah, definitely the heavyweight title was down the road for me. And seems like that's been a story of my career. Is like, here's the brass ring, but you can't quite have it.
Interesting, because, you bring up the television championship tournament because Rob Van Dam was injured in a match with Rhino where he hurt his leg on a guardrail, which made him relinquish the championship. So they had a tournament, and if I'm correct, Super Crazy ended up winning that tournament. And then he loses, immediately to Rhino. So there was a lot of Rhino in ECW at the end. But
I love Rhino.
Yeah, I loved Rhino too.
Rhino's amazing. I love him. He's such a nice guy.
His short story is I had a backyard wrestling federation like everybody did in the year 2000. And I remember Rhino's pile drivers were always, he'd grab a woman and he would never, ever, he was so safe with them too. But the way he did it was he would fall backwards and they would land on top of him. Like, what a pile driver. So me and my friends would joke in our backyard doing Rhino pile drivers. We'd grab our friend and just fall backwards and have someone land on top of us. We're like, what a Rhino pile driver. He was so safe.
His legs are so massive, man. You were never going to hit your head.
God, what a great talent, though. He was so good. Though when ECW closes, though, is there a conversation? Because I've talked to other ECW wrestlers where they were absolutely shocked to see Paul Heyman on Monday Night Raw doing commentary. Even WrestleMania 17, he does commentary for that broadcast. Were you shocked? Did you know about this? Because a lot of people didn't know that the WWE was giving Paul Heyman about $100,000 a month.
Most of us didn't know anything. Paul would never tell us. He kept telling us lies of why we weren't getting paid certain times. He'd have the big meeting, and he was such a good talker that he would, you'd go walk through hell for him. And none of us had a clue. And everybody's right that said this. I didn't know we were done until I saw him with Jim Ross on Monday Night Raw. And it was like somebody had just let all the air out of my balloon. I went through like a 6 or 7 month depression spell after that because I worked so hard to get to ECW and I was right there to get it, and then all gone to shit for that. Yeah, Paul never manned up and told us that we were closing, and we had no idea he was getting money from WWE. He would always say, I've never drawn a dime from this company. I never drew a paycheck. And we were like, whatever. Little did we know that WWE was paying him.
Yeah, if you read Todd Gordon's book, The Original Owner of ECW, boy, is it full of stories and a lot of truth. about the
Yeah.
back history of ECW. And I won't spoil it, but I've interviewed Todd Gordon twice now. And boy, every time I interview him, he drops another, I can't believe you just said that, Todd, about Paul Heyman story. And yeah, it's unfortunate though. So were there ever discussions, because after ECW closed, randomly you would see people, Rob Van Dam eventually, Tommy Dreamer eventually, Just Incredible, Raven, Rhino, Spike Dudley, a few others. But was there other discussion? Because again, Arn Anderson now has come in because FCW was purchased as a producer. And, you know, I know you talked about his relationship before not really being there in the beginning, but yet, is there an opportunity? Is there ever even a discussion? Because I talked to Nunzio, and he said he didn't talk to Paul Heyman for like a year.
Yeah, I didn't see Paul until, I can't remember, 7 or 8, maybe another year when I went in and did a couple jobs. I think one of them was when I worked with Chris Masters way before he was Chris Masters, you know, with the
Masterpiece.
Yeah. Masterpiece. That was never really a talk. I think Dreamer talked to me one day about it, but that's when Vince was during his bodybuilding looking guy, and there was just certain guys that were big enough stars at WWE or ECW that Vince wanted, your Rob Van Dams and guys like that they took care of us, and the rest of us were just left out in the, you know, in the dark. Because it wasn't until they brought back ECW that, you know, some of us did get that call.
What did you think of that? Because I was at ECW One Night Stand, the second one, watching Rob Van Dam beat John Cena, and I wasn't reading any websites, I wasn't reading anything, and out of nowhere, a commercial pops up. I'm like, what is this? And it's like, this Tuesday on the Sci-Fi Channel, ECW. What? It's ECW? You come back, and the only ECW appearance that you have in a match is against CM Punk in 2006. You lose to CM Punk. And you get brought back. So when do you have a contract, and how long was the contract for, and how long did it actually last?
My contract was 4 years. It was for shit money. Most of us got paid $35,000, $40,000. It was shit money.
A year?
Yeah. Our hotels weren't paid for. All they was paid for was our flights. So I was literally losing money being on the road. I had to pay for car. I had to pay for hotels. I had to pay for food. When I got the phone call, Dreamer said, Vince wants to hire you. I said, shut up. I said, no, he doesn't, because I knew that Vince wasn't, and he was a body guy. He goes, no, he says, we're bringing back ECW. He's hiring a few of the originals. They want you. We're going to pick our feud back up. Paul and I have complete control over it. We're going to run just like we did before. He says, and it's going to be great. I said, okay. I said, so I don't have to go to Ohio Valley? He goes, no. I said, and you guys are in control. You and Paul. Yes, it's our control. That's the only way I would sign. And I knew it was shit money, but he said at the end of the year, we'd get bonuses and stuff like that. So I said, okay, you know, to get my shot. Signed, and I was like a every other week guy. You know, that's when they were working 4 nights a week and then doing TV, you know, Friday, Saturday, you know, you do Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You were at Raw on Monday and the Smackdown ECW on Tuesday. I think that's what it was like. Yeah. And then you flew home on Wednesday to turn around all about and be back on the road again Friday. And I was on like every other week. I was working Punk on the house shows, Shannon Moore, Stevie Richards. And I worked Sabu the very first night at the ECW arena. And after that arena show, that's when RVD and Kurt Angle worked. After that arena show, Vince took it back over. And that's when he started putting his guys in there. And once that started happening, I wanted out of there because it sucked. It wasn't ECW. None of it was ECW. It was a Disney-fied version. He started putting all his guys in there. And my one TV match with Punk was supposed to go 8 minutes. It got cut down to 6. I tapped out too quick on Punk's move. I misheard him. I thought he was saying tap, and he was saying raise his head. We got miscommunicated. So I tapped out too quick for that. But I hated being there. Like when Francine and I would find out we weren't working the show, we would weasel our way out of the building and go to the next town just so we wouldn't have to be there. Because you had to be there at the building by 11 o'clock in the morning. And you didn't get out of there until like 11 or 12 o'clock at night, if you were lucky. So there were long days for no money. And Paul talked to me. He said he wanted to start pushing me, you know, so I started going over on guys. I started beating Shannon Moore and Stevie Richards. And then I worked with Kevin Thorne and hurt my back again. And once I hurt my back, I was done. I didn't want to be there. And they released me. Well, Vince's doctor called me one day and said, he wanted me to come back. Vince wants you back in the ring. I said, dude, I can barely walk. My back's gone. He said, well, come back to work, or come back. He said, and we'll give you some or some cortisone injections and you'll be able to get back in the ring. I said, you may not have known this, but I was a high-level baseball player growing up. I mean, like really high, and I was really good. I said, and I've seen guys take those cortisone injections, and I know what it does. I said, I'm not taking that shot. He goes, well, if you don't take the shot, Vince is going to fire you. I said, okay, then fire me. I said, because me walking is more important to be at WWE. And like a couple weeks later, Laurinaitis called me and let me go. And he goes, we'll go ahead and let you go, CW. I said, sweet, thank you. I said, can I go back to Japan? And he was kind of taken back. He's like, yeah, you just can't go to TNA for 90 days. I said, no problem. Why? Because I was January 17th of 07.
So you're describing a conversation you had with Vince McMahon's doctor, and the doctor is telling you, by the way, if you don't take these shots, they're probably going to fire you?
100% he said that. He said, if you don't take those shots, Vince is going to fire you, because he said, he wanted me back. He said, you're not doing Vince any good being in the bed at home. I said, I can barely walk because I blew my L5 and S1.
Wow. That's a...
No, I didn't blow that. I was bulging. So when I hurt my back working with Kevin Thorne, it wasn't Kevin's fault. It was just a mistake that happened in the ring. But yeah, he kept telling me that I need to come back and take those shots. And I was like, I'm not taking the cortisone shot. I know what it does. And he said, well, Vince will fire you if you don't come back and if you don't take these shots and come back. His exact words were, you're not doing Vince any good being in that bed. You're not making him any money. I was like, well, fire me then. Me walking's more important to be in WWE. And 2 weeks later, they let me go. And of course, if you ask it out or whatever it is, they're going to deny the hell out of it. But why do I have to lie?
Yeah. No. No reason. Yeah, no, of course, because there's many stories of exactly the description of the thing you just described that's happened to so many people, and that's why there was probably lawsuits. Many wrestlers got together and did that.
I mean, I hated Laurinaitis anyway, because he did something at Hammerstone Ballroom to me and Shannon Moore in one of our matches. He was a complete ass, and Karma got his ass. Finally.
So what did he do? Because I've heard a story from Chase Stevens, and it's very disturbing.
So he, when we went out, I was supposed to be the heel, and I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, why am I going to be a heel at the Hammerstone Ballroom? The last time these people have seen me was my I Quit match where I got a standing ovation. So anyway, I go out, I'm trying to be a heel. They're popping for me. Shannon Moore comes out. Now, I've known Shannon since he was like 16 years old. Shannon's a dear friend of mine. Because we all started together with the Hardys and Hurricane Helms and all of us started here in the Carolinas together. So we start working. Him as a baby face. And I think, was it James Beard that was our referee? Possibly. Anyway, Shannon gets his shine in the beginning. It's time for my heat. Shannon comes outside and says, they're on the headset telling me to go heel. Sorry, CW. So Shannon beats my ass for another couple minutes. And Laurinaitis is on the headset. And this was his thing. The ref would go, CW, now your face. CW, now your heel. CW, now your face. And Shannon was supposed to be up. He was supposed to win that night. As I'm shooting him off for a crossbody, it was a spot for a crossbody, the ref says, go home now, CW, you're up, spinebuster. Shannon comes off awkward, and I catch him awkward and hit him for a spinebuster. 1, 2, he kicks out. The ref counts 3. I'm sitting in the middle ring like, what just happened? And I go in the back, and Laurinaitis is on the headset, and he was the one that was switching it back and forth, screwing with us. When I come in the back, and then he gets all over us about how we didn't, how was he said? I don't know. Shannon kind of went back at him because Shannon had been there longer than I had, maybe a little more clout. And Shannon's like, what are you doing? Going back and forth, change us from heel to baby. It makes no sense. And that was another reason I wanted to be done with that place.
Yeah. If you're a John Laurinaitis guy or girl, you're taken care of. And if you're not, you're not. And
especially if you're a girl.
And I've heard stories from both sides. When you talk to wrestlers who've had a great experience or a terrible experience, and there's some stories out there.
Here's the one thing that was told to me is when they were given the agent reports, Dean Malenko was one of the agents. He was the one that always had to send it in. Well, when you tell him about the critiques and what you had to do and things like that, Vince calls him one day and says, you got all these critique with all the ECW guys, but you never say anything bad about CW Anderson. He said, why not? He said, because there's nothing bad to say about CW. He goes, what do you mean? He said, CW's work's almost perfect. He said, he's slow, he's methodical, he's a heel, he takes his time, he gets over as a heel. Vince says, bullshit. He said, there's something wrong with him. He said, fine. He said, what's wrong? He said, nobody's that perfect. He said, the CW is as close as they came. This is coming from Dean Malenko to Tommy Dreamer to me as we're standing in a hotel room. He says, well, what's wrong with him? Find something wrong. He says, well, he probably could be a tad more intense, but that's it. So the very next week, we're in Texas. I work with Shannon Moore. And after the match, I'm sitting in my chair changing, and I see Ted DiBiase at my 11 o'clock walking towards me. I stand up to introduce myself because I've never met Ted before. I said, hey, Ted. I said, I'm sitting. He goes, CW, I know exactly who you are. You're the reason I'm here. He said, Vince sent me down here to find out the hype is true about you. He said, son, it is. It wasn't just a little bit longer, a couple more weeks or another month. It's when I had the issue with laryngitis in the headset.
Interesting. Yeah, I interviewed Earl Hebner, where Earl Hebner blames John Laurinaitis putting that story out that he was selling T-shirts out of his car, and that's why he got fired. And Earl revealed in my interview, and so it's not secret, he was getting paid an astronomical amount of money to be the main event referee, only doing one match, and some people didn't like that. And also, Laurinaitis wanted to, according to Earl, replace all the agents that were already there with his buddies that were from WCW to come on in. And so, everyone has a different story, different experience.
Why does Earl have a reason to like you? I love Earl Hebner.
Yeah.
I'm close to him.
Yeah. Greatest referee of all time. So
it is absolutely. And here, Charles Robinson is a close second.
Oh, yeah. When you get to second, it's hard because it's like I got like Mike Chioda, I got Charles Robinson, I got all these people, but to me, the Mount Rushmore cannot ever be talked about with referees without Earl Hebner. It's not possible. That's like when you put in a wrestler one together. In my brain, like Stone Cold Steve Austin and like Hulk Hogan have to be there for entertainment wise, because people still, when they do a wrestling impression, is a Hulk Hogan impression without them knowing they're doing one. So. But, with wrestling, though, it's not ballet, and eventually you do retire, but then you came back. Why did you retire, and then why did you want to come back?
I was in a very, a lot of people, when they see wrestlers, they see a lot of things. They always see the glamour part of it, and they see the entertainment, but they don't see the dark side, the lone. And I was going through a very dark part in my life, and it's the darkest thing I've ever went through with an ex-wife and some other things, to the point where I thought retiring would make things better to get away from the business. And it was so bad the night I retired, I tried to commit suicide. It was that dark. And if it wasn't for Brittany, the one I'm engaged to right now, being here, I would have. She's the one that stopped me. And when I mean stop me, she had the gun like this. And wouldn't. It was a very dark part. Right after COVID had hit, so there wasn't much wrestling going on. It was right after I put out that video that I regret putting it out, because some people don't deserve the effort you put into them and the things that you've done or were going to do, and they don't deserve that. And that person didn't deserve what I did. So there was actually a good thing in the long run. And Brittany said it best, you can't see the forest for the trees, and it's a lot easier to see the trees when they're not your trees. So getting away from wrestling during the COVID time and being done for, I think it was like 4 or 5 months before I ever wrestled again, to see how much I miss wrestling and being in the business and being around the boys. My ex-wife made me hate this business. She is from an upper class, different level that doesn't get wrestlers, and she never understood. And some people that are not wrestlers don't understand. We're not normal. We're not better than you, but we're not normal people. I've been You know, I played baseball my entire life. I've wrestled. It's things I love doing, which is entertaining people. I don't do it for the fame. Some guys do it for the fame. Some guys are going to be wrestlers their entire life. Not me. I did it because my baseball career fell through. So when she couldn't understand and was always nagging and dragging down, and, you know, it made me hate the business, and getting away from that issue. And then that stupid thing I tried doing that night made me realize how much I do love wrestling. And then, you know, the thousands upon thousands of messages and emails I got that night, I had one man that said, "Hey, CW, like you need to talk." And never met me before in my life. And it ended up being my pastor from down the road. You know, I met him and got to know him and meet a lot of men at the study, and turned my life over, and made a huge difference in my life. You know, getting and talking to people that accepted Chris and not CW, because at the time when I was with her, I had become CW. I had become that asshole that people saw on TV. I was living that gimmick 24/7, and had lost CW. So I ended up giving a testimony, and I go around. I've had people now say they've listened to my testimony, and they were going through the bad times, and they were going through things. I'll have people message me, say, "Hey, what advice do you have?" And I always tell people, each day you get to wake up, you get to do it right. And every day I wake up on the right side of the dirt is another day to do it right, whether I got it wrong the day before. Now that I've been back for a few years and enjoying what I'm doing, my life's at a good place. I will never let myself get to that point again, and the one thing I do love is this business and the people that I'm in this business with, because they are like family to me. You know, when I lost my dad last month, they were some of the first ones that reached out to me, like, quickly. You know, WrestleCade over the holidays, when we did WrestleCade here in Winston-Salem, I didn't know I was losing him at the time. I knew he was in the hospital, but they even told me, you know, if you need to go be with him, go be with him. My brother said, you know, go wrestle. You've been having it planned. I got it till you get back. So that outlet has allowed me to grieve in my own way to some extent. So my wrestling family has been really special to me, and I'll never take that for granted.